Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for making time for Always On, the AI and cyber risk uh, discussion. I appreciate you guys being here today. I'm going to use my headset today because I used it last week and I think I spoiled myself. I'm going to go ahead and use it, and we'll see how it goes. So I know that you guys are in an ambulatory surgery center, and in that environment, time is money, and it's patients, it's outcomes. Every OR minute is scheduled, every staff hour is allocated, every dollar is accounted for. So I want to make sure that today's conversation earns its place in your day. Today we're going to have not an IT presentation. We're going to have a presentation on leadership. We're not going to talk about a fear-based cybersecurity talk. We are going to talk about leadership and protecting enterprise value inside your ASC. Because today, AI and cybersecurity sit directly in the line of patient safety, regulatory compliance, payer relationships, and the long-term valuation of the facility that you've built. So if you own, manage, or oversee an ASC, this affects you, not theoretically, but operationally right now. So here's what we're going to talk through. What's actually happening with AI in healthcare and ASC operations right now? What this quietly cost you in dollars, time, and patient trust? Where the biggest missed opportunity is hiding inside your facility? What you can actually control as an ASC leader, and how to turn this risk conversation into a growth conversation. At the executive level, this matters for one reason. Technology risk is now enterprise risk. It affects your payer contracts, it affects your accreditation status, and it affects your ability to recruit top surgeons. It also affects the valuation of the facility you've spent years growing. So, AI is the most disruptive force the healthcare industry has seen since the electronic health record. Not because it's flashy, but because it accelerates everything. It accelerates clinical documentation, it accelerates prior authorization processing, it accelerates billing and coding, it accelerates supply chain management. And unfortunately, it also accelerates cyber attacks against healthcare facilities. The why here is important. ASCs are in a uniquely vulnerable position right now. You operate with the data complexity of a hospital: patient records, PHI, payer data, surgical schedules, but typically with the IT resources of a small business. And that gap is exactly where attackers operate. When AI increases the speed of operations in a system built around protected health information, both efficiency and vulnerability increase simultaneously. If leadership doesn't intentionally govern that speed, the ASC absorbs the risk by default. Now, cyber attacks targeting healthcare are rising. We've seen many of them this year already, and ASCs are now a primary target. In recent years, we've seen ransomware shut down surgical scheduling systems, forcing procedures to be canceled or redirected. We have seen credential theft expose patient records through third party EHR vendor portals, and we've seen phishing attacks impersonating anesthesia groups and surgical reps to manipulate financial transactions. In 2024, Change Healthcare, one of the largest healthcare payment processors in the country, suffered a breach that disrupted claims submissions across thousands of facilities for weeks. And ASCs felt that directly. Now, just this week, we had Stryker. While they're not necessarily a payer, they are an equipment maker, and they suffered a breach as well because of the Iran US war. Now, but why does this matter specifically to your facility? Because ASC operations are predictable. Surgical schedules are predictable, billing cycles are predictable, payer remittance timing is predictable, and vendor access windows are predictable. That predictability makes you targetable. And this isn't about fear, it's about understanding initiatives and aligning your protection accordingly. So the leadership question becomes, are you ready? Not tool ready, but strategy ready. If your surgical scheduling system went down tomorrow, Do you have a documented protocol? If a staff member receives an email that appears to come from a payer requesting updated banking information for remittance, is there a verification process that would catch it? If a scrub tech or circulator uses a personal device on your clinical network, do you know what that exposes? If your billing partner or EHR vendor gets breached, who leads the response from your side? And the why is simple. ASCs operate on precision, trust, and compliance. And when disruption hits a surgical environment, confusion escalates into liability within hours. Executive clarity actually can shorten that chaos, and lack of the clarity leads to chaos and then it extends it. So if you store patient records, if you process insurance payments, or you transmit protected health information electronically, which is every ASC, you're on the radar. As I said, ASC do these all day, every day. You integrate with EHR platforms, practice management systems, anesthesia billing, manufacturers, medical devices, payer portals, and supply chain vendors. And here's where most ASCs are genuinely exposed. Most modern breaches originate through third party vendors, not your internal staff. You may have strong internal controls, but if your EHR vendor, your billing company, or your implant rep's portal has weak credentials, you actually inherit that vulnerability. HIPAA doesn't distinguish between your breach and your vendor's breach. The liability lands with you. At the executive level, vendor access and oversight are no longer administrative tasks. They are risk governance functions. So at the same time, if you are not thinking about how to use AI to improve ASC operations, your competitors already are. AI is being used today inside surgical centers to automate prior authorization workflows, reducing approval days from days to hours. It's being used to flag scheduling conflicts and optimize or block utilization. And it's being used to streamline clinical documentation so physicians spend more time on patient care and less time on paperwork. But why does that matter? Because surgeons notice efficiency, payers notice accuracy, and investors notice margin. The ASCs that are positioning for acquisition or joint venture partnerships over the next 3 to 5 years are the ones building operational maturity now. Technology infrastructure is increasingly part of that valuation conversation. So, what's the cost? Well, doing nothing costs you, not just in breach scenarios, but in daily operational friction. Revenue leaks when claims are delayed because billing systems are slow, misconfigured, or breached. Reputational damage happens and it happens fast when a patient data breach goes public. In healthcare, that trust is almost impossible to rebuild. Regulatory fines, HIPAA and high tech penalties alone can range from $10,000 to $2 million per violation category. And many ASC leaders aren't aware of exactly what triggers them. Talent loss. Top nurses, surgical technologists, and clinical staff evaluate the quality of the tools they work with. Outdated, unreliable systems are a absolute retention problem. And then you have patient churn. When your facility has a reputation for technology instability or data breaches, patients and surgeons choose different venues. The why here is margin protection. And in an ASC, small inefficiencies compound quickly across procedures and payer contracts. Small security gaps become major liabilities. Leaders protect margin by reducing friction and preventing avoidable disruption. So we've talked a lot about AI and we talked a lot about cybersecurity and things that you don't have control over. But let's talk about what you do actually control. And I'm going to separate out what is in your hands from what's completely in your authority. So you don't control the threats. You don't control whether cyber criminals target ASCs this quarter, and you don't control how sophisticated AI generated phishing attacks become. You don't control what vulnerabilities exist in your EHR vendor's infrastructure, and you do not control when the next change healthcare level disruption hits the industry. Those are real. They're coming, and they will continue to happen. But you do control your strategy, and you control whether your facility has a formal AI usage policy before staff start using AI tools in clinical and administrative workflows. You control whether access to patient records is locked down and audited, especially for former employees, contractors, or vendor portals. How many of you have a sheet where you just have passwords for vendor portals? You control whether your vendor contracts include cybersecurity requirements and business associate agreements that actually hold partners accountable. When was the last time that you had your business associate agreement looked over by your attorney for accountability in cybersecurity? You control whether financial wire instructions have a verification step before funds move. And again, this is all about accountability. Payers, accreditation bodies, and regulators all evaluate whether leadership exercise reasonable oversight. Oversight is defensible in court, neglect is not. You also control how proactive your facility is and who you trust as your technology strategy partner. Proactive AFCs reduce dwell time. That's the gap between when an attacker gets in and when you detect it. In healthcare, average dwell time before detection is measured in weeks and sometimes months. A lot can be exfiltrated in that big of a window. And the speed at which you pivot matters. Facilities that have tested their incident response plan recover faster. They spend less on breach remediation and they return to normal operations sooner. At the leadership level, proactive posture signals to accreditors, payers, and acquisition partners that this facility is run with discipline. So here's what I ask you to take away from this slide. Today, this is not a technology conversation. Technology is, yes, the mechanism, but what we're really talking about is patient trust, regulatory standing, payer relationships, staff retention, surgeon loyalty, and facility valuation. Every one of those things that I just mentioned is an executive responsibility. And every one of them is affected by how well your technology and your cybersecurity strategy is governed. Again, this is a business growth conversation. AI can reduce prior authorization delays, which means faster revenue collection. AI can improve OR scheduling efficiency, which means more cases per block and more revenue per square foot. And AI can assist with clinical documentation, which means physicians spend more time operating and less time charting. And strong cybersecurity posture is now directly tied to ASC valuation. Buyers and management companies perform technology due diligence, and a facility with documented controls, clean audit history, and a governance structure commands a better multiple than one that doesn't. This is about enterprise value. You built this facility, and protecting and growing that value is a leadership priority. And technology strategy is now part of that equation. Leverage AI as your strategic edge. Use it to reduce friction in prior authorizations and revenue cycles. Use it to streamline clinical documentation and reduce physician administrative burden. Use it to optimize scheduling and OR utilization. But pair every AI adoption with governance. Define what tools staff can use. There are so many tools out there, but do you really want your staff putting information into the free version of ChatGPT and exposing your data? No, you don't. You need to define what tools your staff can use, define what patient data they can touch in those tools, and define who is accountable for that. Because speed without control is simply fast exposure. The facilities that get this right will be the ones that attract the best surgeons, retain the best staff, and command the strongest valuations when it comes time for a transaction. So, how do you actually turn this into growth? Well, you're going to start with clarity because you can't protect what you can't see. Conduct an external exposure assessment, and this tells you what is already visible to attackers before you even have a conversation with anyone. Review your vendor access and permissions. Map who has access to your systems and whether any of that access is broader than it needs to be. Map operational friction inside your facility, where staff are working around technology rather than with it. And that friction is a cost and it's often a risk. Then identify where AI can safely improve efficiency, starting with the workflows that are costing you the most time and the most money. Growth rarely comes from dozens of initiatives. It comes from a handful of disciplined decisions executed consistently. When you reduce exposure and reduce operational friction at the same time, something important happens. You stabilize the facility, you protect the reputation, and you improve staff experience. You increase surgeon confidence in your operation, and you build the kind of documented, auditable governance that makes your ASC attractive to payers, accreditors, and acquisition partners. That chain reaction, protection leading to performance leading to growth, is why this conversation matters at the administrator and the ownership level. That's why this is not a tech conversation. Over the next 12 months, expect continued pressure from ransomware targeting surgical scheduling and EHR systems. Expect AI generated social engineering attacks to become more convincing, and expect payers and accreditation bodies to increase their scrutiny around data governance. Governance is becoming a leadership competency, not just a compliance checkbox. So let me close with a direct question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for your ASC this year to reduce cyber exposure, improve operational efficiency, and position the facility for long term growth or potential transaction? If it's below a 7, timing may not be right. And that's okay. Not every ASC is in the same place. But if it's an 8, 9, or 10, I want to ask you one more question. What's getting in the way of taking action right now? Is it your budget? Is it timing? Is it not knowing where to start? All three of those. Because here's what I found: most ASC leaders already know there's a gap. They're not lacking awareness, they're lacking a clear first step and a trusted partner to take it with. And that's exactly what the profit and growth strategy session is designed to do. In that session, we'll run an external exposure scan on your facility so you can see what's already visible to attackers. We'll review your vendor access and governance posture, and we'll identify the highest impacts AI opportunities in your specific workflows. And we'll map a practical path forward. There's no obligation and no pressure. You leave with clarity, you leave with what's exposed, what's the priority, and what's the next steps looks like for your specific facility. The only question is whether now is the right time for that conversation or if it's something you want to consider down the road. If now is that time, you can schedule your session at citian.group/risk. It takes about 90 seconds to book a session, and the clarity you'll get will be phenomenal. As always, I ran a little long, but I appreciate you guys sticking with me. Um, Again, book your session at citian.group/growth and have a great week. And as always, be absolutely kind to each other. This has been Earl with Citian Group, staying always on and always ahead.